بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم افتح علينا بحكمتك وانشر علينا برحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله عدد كمال الله كما يليق بكماله. يا عليم علمنا من علمك ما ترضى به عنا ولا تؤاخذنا بما تعلمه منا. يا حليم خلقنا بخلق الحلم وحققنا بحقائق العلم. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. MashaAllah. So we got to verse 5 and we'll pick up with that today. And we've been speaking about the attributes of God. Your legal knowledge of God is legal knowledge of His attributes and not of His essence, because His essence is unfathomable in this world and the next. And as you know, there are 13 foundational attributes of the greatest importance. One of them by itself at the very beginning, which is necessary existence, the ontological or the self attribute that indicates everything about the essence. It indicates the essence and everything about it, leaves nothing unimplied. Okay, then you have 5 negative attributes, the effect of which is to negate, regarding our conception of God, that which is not fitting. Okay, so here we have pre-existence, everlastingness, self-sufficiency, dissimilarity, and oneness. And then we come to the 7 positive existential attributes, and he gives them to us in the verse. He puts them in a metric order for the sake of the poetry, but if we do them in sort of a logical order, then we have first of all life, and then we have knowledge, and the pair of knowledge is speech, and then we have will, and we have its pair, which is power, and then we have hearing and seeing. So we want to talk about those today. He said in verse 5, له كلام قدرة سمع بصر إرادة علم حياة جل خبر. So he says he has the attributes of speech, hearing, seeing, will, knowledge. Wait. Okay, he has the attributes of speech, power. I left that out. Power, hearing, seeing, will, knowledge, and life. The reports of revelation have come down to confirm this. Okay, he says the report has come down. That's what he's saying. But to put that in English that is easily intelligible, the reports of revelation confirming this have come down to us. So we know this on the basis of revelation, the highest of all sources of knowledge. And we would say also that it is a function of intellect as well. Although there will be some discussion about whether intellect goes beyond establishing that God has life, knowledge, will, and power. They would say that's all known by intellect. Speech, hearing, and seeing, maybe not. Okay? That, they would say, requires intellect with revelation. Okay, so life is the attribute of God that, from our standpoint, is the primary one. Because for God to choose, for God to know, for God to will and to have power, He must be a living God. He is not a nature. He is not a force. He is not something abstract in creation. He is a living, personal God. And we say that life is not connected or not related to anything in particular. Meaning by that the other 6 attributes, each of which is a pair, are related to certain aspects of existence and creation. Okay? But life is not that way. Meaning by that as a matter of theological belief, it is not necessary intellectually to relate life to anything in particular. For example, God's being a living God does not necessarily mean that he has to create living things. All right? So therefore we will say that life is unrelated to anything particular in creation. Okay, but what we mean by that is that it's not necessarily related, but it could possibly be related. Okay, but that's not a matter of theological belief, because theological belief will generally focus on things that are necessary and therefore obligatory. But in our theological tradition, and especially in our spiritual tradition, many of our scholars, especially those who are very spiritual scholars, they will say that in fact all creation is living, and that this is a function of the fact that God created it and he is living. Okay, so that's an interesting point. Again, it's not an obligatory theological belief, but it is to say that I believe, and my teachers believe, and many great teachers believe, that everything in creation is alive. And that's not just an intellectual belief, that's also a belief that is borne out in the Quran and in the Hadith. The Quran speaks of everything in the heavens and the earth glorifying God. And the Quran tells us, for example, that the mountain, if you stand on it and you're a saint, you believe in Allah, the mountain is very proud that you are standing on it, and it even boasts to the other mountains that I have a saint on me. Okay, and these are not to be taken lightly. These are really powerful truths. They're powerful truths. The whales of the sea pray for the believing scholar, the scholar who practices what he or she knows, and they cry when he dies. That's amazing. So therefore, we believe, at least I believe, but it's not obligatory for you to believe, that everything in creation also is alive. We say, is there life in outer space? Is there death anywhere? Is there absence of life anywhere? You know, but what they mean to say is, are there Martians out there? Right? But the atom is alive, and the atom praises God, and it glorifies God. And the molecule, the cell, the rocks, the water, they all glorify God. So life is the primary attribute. Then after that comes knowledge, and knowledge is related to creation and existence, to creation and to non-creation that would have been possible had God wanted to create it, and to the nature of existence. So God's knowledge pertains to the knowledge of everything necessary, all axioms, all maxims, all primary truths, all principles, such as the part is smaller than the whole, okay, in standard space. And all mathematical truths, all quantitative and qualitative truths, all geometric truths, God knows that. And of course, of the greatest of all things in necessity that he knows is the reality of necessary being, the reality of God himself. God knows God. You get closer and closer and closer in this life and the world, but you will never fathom him. You just get filled more and more and more. But he knows that. He knows all that is necessary. He knows all that is possible. When we say that he knows all that is possible, we mean that he knows everything that pertains to the created world and to the world that was not created but could have been created, which is infinitely greater than the created world. For every leaf, there is an infinite set of other leaves that could have been created in its place, and non-leaves as well. So he knows all of that. And there is nothing that you can imagine that God does not know from before creation, before time and place, pre-existently. So for example, today, the film industry developed these incredible special effects. Right? When you go back and see how they began to develop with Godzilla and things like that, they're sort of laughable, right? But today, they're like really real. And so you see Star Wars, and you see The Lord of the Rings, and The Golden Compass, and Harry Potter, and that's about as many movies as I've ever watched. But you could go on and on, right? And there is nothing in those movies or the special effects that was not known to God before the creation of the heavens and the earth. If he had willed to create the world of the Golden Compass, where people's souls walk outside their bodies, he had the power to do that. He created it as a movie in certain people's minds to be produced in this century, but it is not anything new. Everything we discover was already known to him from before the beginning. Okay, so all things possible, and then all things impossible, such as the existence of two gods, or three gods, or a Greek pantheon, or a Hindu pantheon, and all of the notions that they have, and all of the impossibilities. All of that is known to him, Azza wa Jal. And his knowledge manifests that absolutely in one manifestation that befits his perfect being. Okay, so his knowledge is what? Necessary, not possible. His knowledge is necessary. His lack of knowledge about anything is impossible. Okay, and this is not arbitrary. This is applying the rules of intellect, which we are not very strong at usually, because we haven't been trained that way. So it sounds arbitrary. It sounds like we're playing with words. No, we're not. We're understanding realities. Okay, so his knowledge is necessary. His knowledge is pre-existent. None of it is created. None of it is acquired. He doesn't learn from you that, oh, you used your left hand instead of your right hand. But I thought it was going to be your right hand. No, that's not the way it works. Okay, his knowledge is everlasting. It never diminishes. It never decreases. His knowledge is self-sufficient. Doesn't need angels. The angels tell him about everything in creation. They love to do that. And there's a special community between him and the angels, but Allah doesn't need to know anything from angels. And if you look at the hadith where Allah tells us about the angels, they will say they come to tell him that there's a certain servant doing something, but Allah knows better already, right? So he doesn't need angels, he doesn't need computers, he doesn't need books, although he writes it all out in books. But he doesn't need that. And his knowledge is also dissimilar. It's not like what you have. You have knowledge. And your knowledge is the greatest thing about you. But your knowledge is nothing like his knowledge. Ibn Ata'Allah says, may Allah be pleased with him, Ilahi, أنا الجاهل في علمي فكيف لا أكون جهولا في جهلي. He says, my Lord, I am ignorant in my knowledge. Okay, wouldn't you say that? I would say that. What do I know? If I know something about fiqh or usul or Quran, I know I'm so ignorant about everything else about it. I'm ignorant in my knowledge. Okay, but I have a minimum so that you can say, well, he's got enough knowledge to talk. Okay, but I am ignorant in my knowledge. فَكَيْفَ لَا أَكُنْ جَهُولًا. So how can I not be extremely ignorant in my ignorance? That is our description. That is not Allah's description, Azza wa Jal. His knowledge is utterly dissimilar, and His knowledge is one. It's not made up of elements, not made up of chapters, not made up of programs or anything like that. It is one knowledge that is completely, we would say, jam'a. It is completely gathered, okay, that exposes everything. And maybe if you wanted, you could compare that to the point universe theory, what these idiots call the Big Bang theory. See, that is a metaphysical sacrilege. They don't know anything about metaphysics. What do you know about Big Bang? No, you know one thing, that there was a point out of which everything came. And whether it was a Big Bang, that is a metaphysical betrayal to say that, well, there couldn't be a God here, could there? So we just call it an explosion. Big firecracker. You know, idiots, really. You know, they do not know how to fly. And so they try to jump as high as they can. Right? So, but in the point theory of the universe, you have, that point is what? Jam'a. See? Jam'a. It is absolute gatheredness. Gatheredness. And out of that comes farq. Out of that comes separation. And that is a very good proof of creation from nothing. That's exactly what it is. But when we say that the point theory of the universe, or the expanding universe theory, which is a descriptive way of talking about that, indicates creation of nothing, then they will say, out of order. Order in the court. Be quiet, you metaphysicists. We will have no metaphysical intrusions in physics. Okay, but you already intruded. You called it Big Bang. And it's nothing. You have no idea about that, whether there's sound there or not. Okay? And we call it creation from nothing. And that's what it is. And it is oneness. That's one of the best examples of oneness, that there is gatheredness. So that's the way Allah's knowledge is. It is a knowledge that contains in it everything in one gatheredness. Okay? And then it manifests that. His speech, as we said, relates exactly to what his knowledge relates to. So God's speech points to his knowledge. His knowledge manifests itself. This is the only difference. Speech demonstrates. Speech points. Knowledge manifests. What does God speak about in his eternal, uncreated speech? All things necessary. The greatest of them being necessary existence, God himself. He speaks about that. He glorifies himself. He praises himself. And he has a right to do that. And all creation glorifies himself. And he speaks about all other things that are necessary. Mathematical propositions, axioms, maxims, and so forth. And then he speaks about all things possible, especially the creation of the world, the creation of the heavens and the earth, the garden and the fire, the day of judgment, and how many breaths you will breathe in the garden. May we all be in the garden together. And how many breaths will you breathe in the garden? Infinite numbers. And yet he knows the number of infinity. And he knows the number of the infinite breaths that you will breathe in the garden. And he speaks about that. And his speech demonstrates, points to what his knowledge reflects. Okay, that's a beautiful knowledge. And that is in the tablet of light. He creates the tablet of light, and there the pen writes it. all out, that you will be born on such and such a day. You will live in such and such a place. You will move then at such and such an age to some place else. You'll grow up, you'll get married, you'll have children, and so forth. All written in the tablet of light. Okay, that's his created speech, because that speech is created, but his other speech is an attribute, and it is not created. Okay, and then it talks about all possibilities that were not meant to be, and are not meant to be, and will not be in the future. Okay, such as, for example, do you have a twin? Then it wasn't meant to be. And you're not going to have a twin. Finished. He willed for his own reasons, for his own wisdom, that you will not have a twin, or that you will have a twin, or that you'll be three. Okay, so his knowledge speaks about that. And one of the great debates in Islam is the debate about whether the Quran is created or not. And so we should say something about that without taking too long, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. But this was an innovative belief, and the people who innovated this speech about the Quran were the Mu'tazila. And you'll see that the Mu'tazila are, what do you call it? The straw horse, or the beating boy, or what do you say? But they always come up on the wrong side of the equation, and our scholars are always knocking them down. Okay, but the fact is that the Mu'tazila, they are an early movement in Islam who were very much concerned about da'wah. They were very much concerned about spreading Islam among Christians and Jews and Magians, and also in the process of doing that, they had to talk about a lot of abstract things that Jews, Christians, Buddhists, Magians, and others talked about, and they did that in their own way, but they made big mistakes. And one of the things you'll see when we look at the Mu'tazila is that although they loved reason and they believed that they followed reason, they made a confusion between reason and between customary experience. And someone asked the question about that yesterday after class, but it's really important that customary experience belongs to the realm of the possible. It does not belong to the realm of the necessary. Okay, so we do not confuse what is rational with what is customary. That's a huge mistake. So for example, if we believe that God turned Moses' staff into a big serpent that moved like a small serpent, is that customary? No. Did you ever see that happen? Probably not. Okay, but is it irrational? Absolutely not. That is another possibility in the infinite realm of possibilities, where God is free to do whatever he wants. Okay, and he can follow his sunnah, his natural course, or he can not do that as he wills. Okay, so this is where the Mu'tazila make a lot of mistakes. Also, the Arabic language, as we said, is an ancient tongue. Really old, going back thousands of years. We could say easily on the basis of comparative linguistics that it is the oldest known language of its family, with the possible competition of Thamudic, the language of Thamud, which is written in Thamudic script all over the Arabian Peninsula. And that's also really ancient Semitic, and it's different from Arabic. It's southern, it's like Himyaritic. Okay, but Arabic is at least 10,000 years old, and probably much more than that, probably much more than that. Okay, so in any case, Arabic, like all the Semitic languages and Hamitic languages, and probably this is true of human languages, is always rooted in concrete reality. It's always tangible. Okay? And so for example, if I say ma'rifah, which means knowledge based on experience. The word and the whole concept comes out of the coxcomb, which is that little red comb that the rooster has on his head. You've seen it, right? Is there anything like it? Have you ever seen anything like a coxcomb? Could you explain it to me if I had never seen it? No. So that is, the root that Arafa comes from, the coxcomb. And therefore, to know, ma'rifah refers to knowing things that you could never figure out on your own without experience. But it's very concrete, and everything in Arabic is like that. So when the Mu'tazilas begin to work in the realm of abstraction, they're actually not very good at that. So when they talk about speech, divine speech, well, you know what speech is. It's what I'm doing right now. I'm speaking, right? Language, sounds, grammar, first this, second that. Well, that's all temporal. That's all hadith. It all has beginning. So therefore, and this Quran, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, it's all ordered. First this, second that. It's got sounds. It is temporal. So they said, well, the Quran is also temporal. It's also created. Don't you get it? And this is where a lot of our scholars said, no, like you've gone too far. Okay, so then the Mu'tazila get very angry. They said, well, maybe you're mushrikun. So you think that this Quran in Arabic with its letters is uncreated and that it's like God, then that's almost shirk. In fact, they say it is shirk. Maybe you should be put to death. And they will beat Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. And he said, no, I'll never say that. I'll never say that. Okay, so what's this all about? Well, again, this is a great theological debate. And it's because there is an inherited knowledge. There is an inherited understanding, which maybe has never been articulated in words. But then once you articulate it in words, you've got to get it right. And this is where our scholars, men and women, defend the inheritance. Okay? So they say that no, the matter's not that simple. Because the Quran is divine speech. And divine speech is a divine attribute. And that speech is the same as his knowledge. And it is not sound. It is not language. It is not words. It is not grammar. It refers to everything necessary, possible, and impossible in pre-existence, in eternity, self-sufficiently, not needing language or grammar, and in a dissimilar way. And it is one. Okay, so again, you can go back to the point theory of the universe. That God's speech, which is his attribute, is not sound. It is not letters. It is not Arabic. It is not Hebrew. It is not Syriac. It's not any other language. But it is a demonstration of his knowledge that comes out of total gatheredness. And in that gatheredness implies all the details of divine knowledge in separation. Do you follow that? That's really important. And in fact, the word Quran, what does it mean? It's probably not fair to ask that question, but the basic meaning of qara'a is not to read. It is what? Jama'a, right, to gather. Because the Quran gathers together in its special letters and its words all divine knowledge, infinite knowledge. And the purer that your heart becomes, the better your actions become, the greater your knowledge becomes. You will see that. One of my beloved colleagues asked me, he said, this summer you'll have time to read the Quran in Ramadan. He said, I want you to look at the secret of gathering and separation as reflected in the verse in Al-Baqarah about Sayyidina Ibrahim when he says, show me, O my Lord, how you resurrect the dead. And he says, take the birds and train them and put them on the hills and call them to that. Okay. And then I began to read the Quran with that in mind, and it's like everything you read has got something to say about that. It's amazing. Amazing. Okay, so therefore when we talk about divine speech, we talk about divine speech which is a divine attribute. And that is uncreated and eternal and absolutely one. And it reflects everything in God's knowledge. And then we talk about God's created speech. And that is the speech in the divine tablet, in the tablet of light. And it is also the Arabic Quran as revealed to the Prophet ﷺ and written on paper and memorized in hearts. And it is also the original law or Torah that was given to Moses, most of which was lost, and the Psalms of David, which were revealed to him, and were over 4,000 Psalms, and only 150 remain today. And there's question about whether even they're authentic. Okay, so those original books, the Gospel of Jesus, which we don't have, because we don't even know what language it was written in. Those were also perfect speech of God that was created. Okay, so where is the issue here? The issue here is that the created word of God, okay, such as the words of the Quran, perfectly reflects and is perfectly connected to the gathered speech of God, which is uncreated. So therefore, don't talk about what you don't know anything about. And don't come and say that the Quran is created, because really the issue is much more complex than that. Because this Quran that is created perfectly reflects the speech of God that is uncreated. And you cannot divorce the two. Okay, so this is a big theological issue, a huge theological issue. And it really shows the fact that people like the Mu'tazilas, and we don't curse them at all, and we don't say they're disbelievers, but they were activists who were trying to do what needs to be done, and they were working it out on their own. But they made mistakes in doing that. And when they made the mistakes, the tradition corrected the mistakes. And when it corrected it, it opened to us doors that really open up to the knowledge of God and the knowledge of reality in ways that you can never fathom and never imagine. Okay? So it's like the unfolding of the flower when it blooms. The flower was there, the rose was in the bud, and now the rose opens up into this beautiful rose. Okay, so speech, very important. Very important. And the Quran reflects all that divine speech. You could say, for example, just like a beautiful pond in the night reflects all the stars in the heavens. Could you put all the stars in that pond? No. But it reflects those stars that are in the heavens, right? Okay, so then we go to will and power. Will and power. What is the nature of will? And by the way, someone asked yesterday, what are the Arabic words? So the Arabic word for life is what? Hayatun. Hayatun. Al-hayatu. And the Arabic word for knowledge is al-ilmu. Ilmun. And the knowledge and the word for speech is kalamun, kalam. Okay, and then we come to will, which in Arabic is iradatun, iradatun. Okay, and what does will do? Okay, any of you remember? We talked about it really briefly. What does will do? Yes. Nope, that's speech. Speech is the pointer. Will is the determinator. Can we say that? Can't say determinator in English, right? Determiner. You say terminator, right? And then you go to Hollywood. But it is the determiner. So will is connected to the realm of the possible. And the realm of the possible is the realm of creation. And in the realm of the possible, as you know, everything is known to God. So there is you, yourself, me, myself, and I, right? And you are as you are. And you could have been different, you could have been bigger, you could have been broader, you could have been smaller, you could have pursued a different course of education. All of that was known to Allah. All right? And out of the infinite possibilities that pertain to you or to anything, He decreed and determined that you would be you with exactly the attributes that you have now. Okay? So this is really important. Here are my glasses. Okay? They have a number of attributes. We can only know the glasses through its outward, secondary attributes. How many are there? Well, we could number them for years. We could always add something new. There are lots of them. But they're not infinite. They are delimited, right? These are not infinite. These have a beginning and they have an end. Okay, we might go in more and more detail, but we are describing the same glasses. The other attributes that are possible regarding these glasses, but which God did not will to be, such as that it be wide and not narrow, or such that the lens be of a different power, these were excluded from existence by His will. Of course, a human being made this, but He willed that the human being make it. All of this was determined. Okay, so will always selects what will be out of a set of infinite possibilities multiplied by infinite possibilities. Infinity times infinity times infinity. It is the function of absolute knowledge and then of wisdom. See, so God determines that the tree will be this way and not another way, that it will be planted in that place and not another. All of these things are determined, and for that reason, we say, لَيْسَ فِي الْإِمْكَانِ خَيْرٌ مِمَّا كَانَ. This is the best of all possible worlds. That's the way that Voltaire rendered it in Candide. This is the best of all possible worlds. And then there were philosophers like Leibniz, if I'm not mistaken, who also held that. They probably got it from us because we were talking like this for over 1,000 years before they started talking that way. But we say, لَيْسَ فِي الْإِمْكَانِ. There is not in the realm of possibility better than what was, than what has been. Meaning that even though the world is filled with horrors, and tribulations, and terrors, and oppression, and abuse, and the fall of civilizations, and the rise of civilizations, God willed this to be based on His infinite knowledge of all possibilities. Okay? So it's very important for us to be patient. It is very important for us to accept that. If you knew the horror of what happened in this peninsula with the fall of Muslim Spain and Portugal, in which there were millions and millions of Muslims who were the majority populations in 2/3 of the peninsula, and who were very similar in their culture and everything else to the Syrians or the Lebanese or the Jordanians or the Palestinians, because those were the main areas where Muslim Portugal and Spain came from. If you knew what happened to them, how their families were enslaved, how their families were destroyed, how they were killed, how their women were treated, how the Inquisition dealt with them after that. This is one of the darkest stories in all humanity. And if you want to talk about the fascist state and Nazi Germany, or you want to talk about the KGB and Stalinist Russia, you've got to link it to the Spanish Inquisition and the Portuguese Inquisition, because they did it big time. They did it big time. And they destroyed everything that was here. And what was here was beautiful beyond words. And that's not just romanticism. That's based on knowledge of what was here. Okay? So is that good? Does that make you happy? But again, God has wisdom in that. This is a test which is one of the greatest tests that human beings were ever tested with, and that believing communities were ever tested with. Look what happened to the children of Israel. Look what happened to the Christians. Look what happened to the Christians. The Christians who truly followed Jesus were fed to the lions. They were cut in two by saws. Sometimes their heads were cut down from the top, because they said, I believe in one God and I will not prostrate to the statue of the emperor. They say, okay, well, we'll cut your head in two. We'll slice you in two. See, will you repent? No, I won't. And they would tell them, today you go to the lions, and they would say, Ashukru lillah. And Tunisia has beautiful stories of that. In all these lands, Egypt, Tunisia, Syria, they were deeply steeped in the religion of Jesus Christ. And they worshiped God as Jesus worshiped God. They didn't worship Jesus. Okay, and these people were treated that way. Everything was destroyed. The books were all destroyed because Jesus came to prepare the way for the greatest of all prophets, our prophets. That was God's wisdom in that. Okay, so also in the fall of Muslim Portugal and Spain, there is great pain and great suffering and great oppression. Okay, but there's also great wisdom. Look at the Crusades. Look at what's happening in Palestine. Since in the 20th century. That's an ugly story. Look at the genocide taking place in Syria today. Blatant genocide. Okay, but still, لَيْسَ فِي الْإِمْكَانِ خَيْرٌ مِمَّا كَانَ. There is not in the realm of possibility anything better than what has been, because God has wisdom in this. So you believe in God and you be patient. And that's why when the Muslims knew that everything here will fall, after they lost Toledo, they knew that it will not strategically be possible to hold on to Portugal and Spain unless we can retake Toledo. And they weren't able to do that. And the Christians are certainly not going to let them do that. Okay? The Muslims here had to have Toledo, just like the Ottoman Empire had to have a particular city to hold Hungary. Do you know what that city was? Vienna. The Ottomans only wanted to conquer Vienna so that they could hold Hungary, because they had Hungary. Hungary was 30% Muslim under the Ottomans. Bulgaria, 80% Muslim. Greece, 50% Muslim. What happened to those people? What happened to those people? Ask them in their graves. What happened to those people? But, history is the big story. The painful story, but God has in that great wisdom. You've got to be tested, and this ummah has been tested like no other ummah before it, and we're still here. They were totally unsuccessful, and this religion, inshallah, is coming back to life, and it will come back to life. And this is something that the Muslims of Portugal and Spain believe very deeply, that Islam will come back here because it belongs here. This peninsula welcomed Islam. Islam came here very swiftly. The conquest was a single battle that lasted for 8 days. The Muslims versus the Visigoths, who ruled Spain and Portugal, took 8 days. And then the Muslims defeated the Visigoths, and then the whole rest of Spain and Portugal, over a period of 2 years, just negotiates peace treaties. No more battles. That's amazing. The Crusades, when they come from the north, they are not welcomed in this land at all. They're hated. And they bring a whole new culture that we're going to make these people Europeans again. We will change their clothes. All the Christians and Jews and Muslims here, they dressed like Arabs. They ate like Arabs. They spoke Arabic. And we're going to change that. You'll speak Latin. You'll speak your Latin, Romance dialects, everything. And the church will do that. It will change the culture. It will change the identity. It will change the names. And this was very unwelcomed to Jews, Christians, and Muslims. And it took them 800 years. Battle after battle. And they had to develop a culture of war and genocide to do that. The Hidalgo culture. Okay, but again, when the Muslims saw that they were going to fall, they said, La ghaliba illallah. There is no conqueror but God. You conquer me today, God conquered me, and I'm content. And tomorrow we will conquer you, because Islam will come back. So this is very important. This is why when we look at evil in the world, we respond to it in terms of Sharia, which means help the oppressed. Respond to the call. Do jihad. Jihad is one of the greatest obligations of all, and it is the ethical pinnacle of Islam. Okay, it's a moral principle. Okay, but we accept in haqiqah, in our hearts, the wisdom of what happened. And I don't know much about you, but I do know a lot about our community and people like you. And I know that if we were to talk with you, that probably every one of you has got a horror story to tell. And some of you don't, but a lot do. And it's very important, that we know that whatever has happened to us, it was God's wisdom. And we will grow beyond it. We will not be thwarted by it. We will not be bent and ruined by it. And this ummah has really been through hell, and still is going through hell. Because but it will come, it is coming to life, and inshallah it will come to life. So will always selects out infinite possibilities. We talked about the contingency of the world, right? We talked about the fact that this world is all temporal, right? All has a beginning. It's all bound in time, all bound in space. Therefore, everything in it shouts takbir and points to God. The proof of God is the world. Open your eyes. Okay, that's contingency, right? We talked about that. But there's another contingency also, and that is that these things which are beautifully made, these are human things. I could have brought in a rose, which is even more beautiful than this, or a leaf of a tree. These things are made perfectly, and they cannot exist that way without will of the necessary being. Okay, so you need to understand that really well. And one of the things that helps us to understand that is something that I learned from my father. May Allah have mercy upon him. He was an amazing man. And he used to say, take 10 coins, okay, like 10 pennies, and they're all equal, they're all new, they're all the same weight, and number them 1 through 10, and put them in your pocket, okay, and mix them up, and pull out number 1 first. What is the possibility that you'll do that? 1 to 10. Okay, put it back, mix them up again. Now, just pull out number 2 second. What is the probability? 1 to 100. Okay, put it back, mix it up. Pull out number 3 third. What is the probability? 1 to 1,000. What is the possibility that you could do this simple, inane task of pulling number 10, 10th from your pocket after getting everything else in order? 1 to 10 billion. Meaning that if you were to draw a penny from your pocket every second and then start over every time you have a mistake, you might be able to get that order in 325 years. Okay, so this is really important. These things cannot just happen. Okay, and when we talk about the pennies, these things are all constructed, they're all put together right? They're all parts. And those parts are all believe for a moment that these things that exist because they're just really put together well. And therefore their natures give them sustenance. No, we don't believe that. And we believe in an atomistic world. In an atomistic world, okay, just let me say this now, I'm calling you, in which these glasses exist from one moment and are created in another moment and are recreated in another moment. So if we look at yourself or at anything in creation, we could use the metaphor of the film, right? So in a motion picture, right, you have frames. And the frames are all very similar. And when they move quickly in front of the camera's eye, it looks like the things have continuity. It looks like they're moving. That's actually the way reality is structured too. So like this stand, what could be stronger than this? This is steel. This is really well made. But in fact, it exists from one moment to another by virtue of God's will and power. He created it at a certain time, and he keeps recreating it from nothing at every other time. It does not exist in reality from one moment to another by itself. Is that irrational? No, that is reason. That is intellect, based on understanding the nature of possible being and its contingencies and the nature of necessary being. Okay? And if you say, no, you can see, look at this is strong, this is hard. No, you don't see anything. You just see the surface. The fact that you think that this has permanent existence by virtue of itself, that is psychological habit. It's just a habit. That is not metaphysics. Okay, so we want to talk about these things as we are. And therefore, God continually creates and recreates from one moment to another. And this is astounding. And may we understand this. And this is what you've got to be aware of when you do your dhikr, when you pray your prayers, when you read the Quran. You know, in the Quran, the amazing story of the Queen of Sheba, who is a great woman and a great receptacle of mercy. An amazing woman. And when she's coming to Jerusalem to visit the prophet King Solomon, he wants to bring her throne to Jerusalem, right? And he's sitting in his assembly and he said, who can bring me her throne? And the Ifrit, which is a jinn scholar. We're not Ifrits. But the jinni who is a scholar, he's called Ifrit. You better be careful about Ifrits because they can cause you a lot of trouble. The Ifrit, he's powerful, right? He knows lots of secrets. He said, I can bring it to you before you get up from this session. Give me 30 minutes to an hour. Right? And then Asif, you know, who is the great saint under Solomon, he says, I can bring it to you before the blink of an eye. And there it is. That's really important. He says, I can bring it to you. We call this mujaz mursal. We call this a certain type of metaphor. Just like you can say as a doctor, I will heal you. Can you heal anybody? You're not a doctor anyway, okay? But Allah will heal people through you. So you can say, I can cure you. I can teach you. Can I teach you anything? No. But Allah enables me to speak, and He enables you to hear, and He enables you to learn. But still, I can say, I will teach you. That's not shirk. And this man says, I will bring you the throne. How's he going to bring it? He didn't even move. He just said, Ya Allah, bring the throne. Because he has dua mustajab. He knows the secret name of Allah. And there it is. Okay, so what happens in the throne? And the throne looks something like this. Except it's more beautiful, but this is actually a throne. In our tradition, we call this a throne. And the kursi, this is not a kursi. We call it today kursi. It's a throne. And the kursi is the footstool under it, which you don't have here. Okay, that's the kursi. But this throne exists from one moment to another by virtue of the sheer will and power of God. He creates it and recreates it and recreates it. And this is done so perfectly and so seamlessly that you can't see the gaps, right? Okay, so what happens in that case is that Allah does not recreate the throne in the next moment in Saba, in Sheba, but He recreates it in Jerusalem. And our scholars say that there was no transportation of the throne, because it was instantaneous, and it's just that the throne was recreated, not in its customary place in Saba, but it was recreated in Jerusalem. And those are the kind of signs in the Quran that enabled our theologians to understand the atomistic nature of reality. There are many. Our scholars are very profound. They read the whole of the Quran. They live it. Imam Abu Hanifa, may Allah be pleased with him. Do you know anybody like Abu Hanifa? Can you show me anything like Abu Hanifa? Imam al-Shafi'i said of Abu Hanifa, al-fiqhu iyalun ala Abi Hanifa, that all fiqh is a dependent child of Abu Hanifa. Abu Hanifa is beautiful beyond words. He's a master of the law. I'm a Maliki. I love Imam Malik also. But the Maliki school relies on the Hanafi school for many things, especially the questions, the hypothetical questions. They were all brought to Medina without answers. They had Hanafi answers, and then the Medinese said, well, we'd like to have the questions, but not the answers, thank you. And we will get our answers to the same questions. Imam Abu Hanifa was amazing. And once when he was a young man, he was very beautiful. He's a Persian, a noble Persian, very handsome. And one day he's walking in the market, and two salihin, two upright men, they see him and they say, that's Abu Hanifa. That's Abu Hanifa. He prays all night. He doesn't sleep at night. And Abu Hanifa heard it. So what does Abu Hanifa say? Astaghfirullah. No, because whenever you're praised by upright people, it is the tongue of the salih that is speaking by the will of God. That's why if a saint or a sheikh tells you something good about yourself, say, no, I'm not like that. No, just be thankful, because you are. You are. So Abu Hanifa then, from that night on, he never slept another night in his life. And he would pray all night long. And they would do khatam of the Quran every night. We had scholars who would do 3 khatams in a night. Can you do that? Can you do that? And this is what we call tight, folding up of time and place. Folding up of time and place. Because time is not the same for them. Okay? Abu Hanifa was amazing. He was beautiful. Okay, but these are people who reflect on the Sharia and on the Aqeedah from a total recitation of the Quran every night. And look at the hadith, and they sort the hadith out. Have a good opinion of them. Our tradition is an amazing tradition. Okay, will and power, will and power. And then we have hearing and seeing, and these are another pair. And what do? They have the function of revealing reality to God as it exists in every present moment. Do you have that? So you have existence. Existence is the big secret. The present moment. Existence, the big secret. You will never understand the reality of existence, not in this world and not in the next world. Existence is the infinite sea, and is always rooted in what? The present moment. May Allah enable us to live in the present moment, not to live in the past, the horrors of the past or the beauties of the past, or to live in an illusory future, but to live in the present moment, preparing for the future, okay, doing what we're supposed to do. Okay, but in every present moment, Allah hears and sees everything that exists. Okay, and so that relates to what? The possible that has been willed to be, and the necessary. So God hears and sees himself. That is the greatest of all things that he hears and sees. In all of his infinity, his absolute being, his knowledge, his will, his power. Okay, and God then sees everything else that exists in the realm of possible being, from the throne to the angels, to the jinn, to human beings, to the earth, to every atom that is in everything that is created, and every wave of energy. He sees it all, and he sees exactly what he hears. They are two different attributes that manifest this reality in different ways. But everything God sees, he hears. So he sees sound. He sees tastes. He sees ideas. He sees intentions. He sees fragrances and smells. He sees touches and surfaces. Everything that exists. You see the table, but do you see inside the table? Do you see under the table? Do you see beneath the table? You see the carpet. Do you see inside the carpet? Do you see the ground? Do you see inside the ground? Do you see inside the earth? Allah sees that all. And he hears everything he sees. He hears the column. He hears the color. He hears the shape. Okay, so hearing and seeing are different attributes. And they pertain to the realm of existence at any given moment. And they are a total revelation of that which is. These are great things. Okay, so we believe that if you know these 13 attributes, you've got a strong foundation. Everything is there that you need to grow. Not to know Allah in his essence. You'll never know that. But you will grow and grow and grow. And now your wudu will be perfect. Your salat will be perfect. You know, your fasting will be perfect. Your dhikr will be perfect. And it will grow and grow and grow. Okay? Now, did you have a question still?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify the difference between will and power.
Mm-hmm.
You say that will is about causality and power about ability.
Can you say that again?
Is will related more to causality, and power to ability?
Is will related to cause? And most people would say power is cause. Okay? And will is the preliminary of the cause. Will gives you the design. Will gives you the configuration, the time and the place. Okay? And those things exist in God's will. And where can that be seen? In the tablet of light, which is the decree, the qada. The qada. The qada, divine decree, is the manifestation of God's will in creation. Okay, and power is qudra in Arabic. We call power qudra, and the manifestation of it is qadar. Qadar, which is destiny. And destiny is when God, in his power, causes the thing to be, and to continue to be, and to cease to be exactly as it was described. Can there be any exceptions to that? Yes. So that beautiful tablet, which God willed to be, you could actually change it. And you change it like this. Okay? And there are lots of stories about that. And the Prophet taught us that the only thing that can change qadr is the dua. And what's that all about? That's all about you, who the whales pray for, and who the whales will cry for when you pass from this earth. Because you're very special, and Allah loves to honor you. And therefore, he may change the decree that was set before the creation of the heavens and the earth just because you prayed, to show how much he honors you. And you are the one that when you mention his name, Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar. He mentions you in the midst of the greatest of all angels. What is that? This is your secret. And then your name is written down. And if you heard the scratch of the pen, you would die of ecstasy. Okay, that's who you are. So you can change that. But in this, you have the real dua. And there is a story which I believe to be true because it was told to me by people that I trust completely, of a murid who lived in Sudan. And he stayed with his sheikh for a long time, maybe 30 years, and he just couldn't do anything. He couldn't progress. And one day he came to his sheikh and he said, Sidi, I've been with you for 30 years, but I don't feel like I've gone anywhere. And he said, Yabni, he said, my son, you're shaqi. You're wretched. Like it's written in the tablet that you are wretched. You go to the fire. And he said, what can I do? He said, well, there's nothing I can do. But he said, there's another sheikh who does things I can't do. He said, go to him. And so he went to that sheikh and he told him a story. He said, I've been with this sheikh for 30 years. I haven't made any progress. And then he told me this. Is there any hope for me? And he said, let me look in the tablet of light. Oh, it's right. You are shaqi. Let me just change that. Sa'id. So he said, let's make it felicitous. And then the man became a great wali. Okay? Now you're not required to believe that story. I do believe that story. But you have to believe that that's possible. Okay? So, you always use your dua. And Allah, to honor you, He will change that tablet. And again, did something happen God didn't know? No. It was a secret. It was a secret that under this tablet of light, God knew, but no angels knew, that when my servant Maryam or Imran will make this dua, I will change the whole tablet and it will recalibrate. Okay, so you can do that. And again, it's really important because although here you're seeing the power of God, the glory of God, also you are special and you are free and you are not forced to do anything. How do you work that out? Well, we'll get there hopefully. Okay, that comes later. Okay, so how are we doing for time? We must be totally out of time. Right? Are we out of time? Sidi. Naam. So that's a beautiful verse, and if you look at the commentary on it, it's about that very thing, right? يَمْحُ اللَّهُ مَا يَشَاءُ. Allah erases whatever He wants from the book. Right? وَعِنْدَهُ أُمُّ الْكِتَابِ. And He has the the foundation of the book, the real book. It's all written there. That, well, we wrote that, and the angels read it, and the angels thought it would be, and guess what? I know what you do not know. This will be changed. This will be changed. Yes?
Does this also apply to wisdom and the length of life?
Can this pertain to provision and to length of life? And it pertains to everything. It pertains to everything. And as we say, the exceptions do not contradict the rules, but exceptions are exceptions. So for example, your provision might be very limited, and by prayer, God might make it very expansive. In fact, some of the awliya, they say that you have a certain time of life that is set for you. And how is it measured? Your life, in minutes, hours? Is it, what do they call it? Greenwich Mean Time? How do they do that? Huh? Breaths, right? That's what you said, right? Breaths. And a breath is, breathe in, Breathe out. That's a breath. So how many? And breathe. Have you ever, depressed people? We have a lot of them. And people have a lot of good reasons to be depressed in this time. You've got to be strong though. You've got to be strong. But depressed people, they don't breathe. They just, tiny little breaths. Just like that. And that's because it's almost like they don't want to live. They don't want to live. And it's like, hey, you're burning up your life. 1 breath, 2 breath, 3 breath, tiny little breath. Breathe. Okay, now you live longer. Okay, so your breaths are there. But then also that can be recalibrated. And there are different things that happen in your life. There are certain tests and so forth which can happen to make your life longer and longer and longer. Okay, usually that doesn't happen, but it can happen. Anything there, you have the power to ask God. Again, usually the great awliya, they don't want to change anything. The great ones, they don't, because لَيْسَ فِي الْإِمْكَانِ خَيْرٌ مِمَّا كَانَ. They know that there's nothing in the realm of possibility better than what God has willed. So usually they like to leave it just like it is.
It's not sometimes made the distinction between what they call the qada al-muqaddar and qada al-mu'allaq. One that can be changed and one that can be changed.
Well, that's a good question. Do you have an example?
Well, this is a theological concept.
Yeah, it's also a legal concept as well.
There is the destiny can be understood.
Yeah.
From two kind of levels.
Yeah.
That change.
Yeah.
Refer to the drawing.
Okay, so that's a very good question. But do you have an example? Do you have an example?
Well, the example would be that there is a realm in which Allah knows from eternity that you...
Yeah, but that's not an example. That's not an example. Okay, so the question is, are there things that don't change? And of course there are many things that don't change. And there are things that you don't ask for either. And I think this is what you're talking about. So for example, can you make a dua? Allah, don't test me? Can you make a dua? Oh Allah, don't have a fire? Can you make a dua? Oh Allah, put everyone in the garden? We regard that to be sinful and wrong. These are fundamental realities which do not change. So you can't say, oh Allah, don't let me die. Okay? These things will be. So that's the way I understand it. And if we saw other examples, we could see it. That's the legal aspect. But in theology, there are certain fundamentals that don't change, inshallah. Yes?
I have two questions, but they're not really related. But the first one is about this concept. So dua, it changes qada, is it? Yeah, because I heard there was a dua, I heard there was a shaykh who made, and some people were having issues with it. He said, Allahumma inna la nas'aluka radd al-qada wa lakin nas'aluka lutfa fi. And we were saying that what's desired from the dua is to change the qada. So they said they didn't like the dua. I don't know, maybe...
Who didn't like the dua?
There were some people.
Who are these people? In Edmonton?
No. No, but it was, there were some Salafi scholars.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but in any case, so this dua is, oh Allah, we do not ask you to change the decree, but to be subtly merciful to us in it. And that's also a very good dua. And that's a dua that indicates ma'rifah. It indicates great ma'rifah. And, there is a story, again, I believe these stories because of the people that told me. You don't have to believe them. But there is a story of a great saint who was sleeping under a big rock. And then Allah revealed to him in the qada that the rock was going to fall on him. Of course, he'd be killed. So he asked this dua. I don't ask you to change the qada, but just to be subtly merciful to me. And so the rock began to drop on him in pebbles. and little pebbles until the whole rock fell, and then he came out of the pebbles and he walked away. Okay, so this is lutf, and we always ask for lutf, in the subtle mercy. What's the other question?
The other question was, I still don't understand with the 13 attributes. Like yesterday, the sister asked, what about benevolence? Like, I'm not saying that benevolence should be one of them, but I just don't understand why these 13, like on what basis have these certain been specified?
Okay, so that's a good question. Why these 13? And my answer to that would be that this is ijtihad. Our entire tradition is ijtihad. So in fiqh we have ijtihad. In aqida we have ijtihad. In tasawwuf you have ijtihad. We believe that the great saints are given inspiration and knowledge, and that's very sound, but they all do ijtihad. They also do. This deen is a deen of ijtihad, of exerting yourself to find the best answer. And so therefore, in looking at all of this, the scholars of these traditions believe that these 13 attributes are absolutely necessary to teach and to learn, and that this should be the foundation of your understanding. Not everybody agrees with them, because as we will see in probably tomorrow, that you have different approaches even among Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah to this. Okay, so some scholars don't like to limit it to these 13. And the question that was asked about benevolence was a really good question. And in fact, maybe my answer was not the best answer to it, because of the fact that Allah insists that He is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. He insists that He is the all-merciful and the giver of special mercies. And mercy is definitely one of His attributes. But in terms of the 13 attributes, mercy is a function of will and power, because it is an act. So God acts mercifully. And you have many, many other attributes that will come under will and power. But one of the things that we will insist on, and this will come up inshallah tomorrow, is that God is utterly free to do in His creation whatever He wills. And He is good. We know that. The Prophet told us that. God is good. And He is merciful. He's Rahman ar-Rahim. But does that mean that the Mongols will not come out of Mongolia and destroy almost everything in Eastern Islamic civilization? So that cities like Nisapur and Tus, will no longer exist, and Ray, they will be leveled and burned to the ground, and Baghdad, which was one of the wonders of God on earth, will be burned, and all of its libraries will be burned, and the Tigris and Euphrates River will run black with burnt books for days and days on end. Okay, so it's like, yes, but you be very subtle in the way you understand these things, because God also in His mercy and benevolence wills that evil exist and that people be tried. And you know your friends, and you know the things that happen to some of your friends that are so painful you can't even mention them, right? Okay, so God ordained that to be too. This is the ugly time we live in, by the way. It's a time when trusts are broken. To have a society, when you have a society when trusts are not broken, it's very difficult to break them. Very difficult to break them. And not to speak about myself, but I grew up, mashallah, in a good life. Never had any trouble. I had disease like polio. I got that when I was 2 years old, and Allah brought me out of it. And a lot of my friends didn't come out of it. That was 1950, the great polio epidemic. And I got it, and it crippled my left side. I was left-handed. And I couldn't use my left side for a number of years, but then I got it back by the grace of Allah. That was a big thing for me, polio. But that was my trauma, okay? And, my mother, my aunts, my great-grandmother, who was an incredible woman, these people were really good. My father, my grandfather, my great-grandfathers, they were really good. And these are people who, in my belief, did not break trusts and would not break trusts and could not break trusts. So alhamdulillah, it becomes something that for me is like natural. Okay, but we live in a time where every trust is broken, right? So for example, when I grew up, you could trust a boy with adult males. Are they going to abuse him? Wallahi, they'd be killed if they abused him. That's the way our society was. We didn't think of that, but had they touched him, they would have been killed. That's that society that we lived in. And the same thing with women. You know, you could trust girls with adult women. They're not going to abuse them or touch them. And you can say, well, I don't believe that. But like I grew up in that world. And that was really beautiful because it meant that boys become like men. Because you can be raised by men. They're not going to hurt you. They're not going to abuse you. Okay, you become strong. And you're not going to do that either. But once you break that trust, ooh. And we see that in the Muslim world today. We see it in the non-Muslim world today. Abuse, you know, in the family. It's well known. And in Muslim families you find the same thing, the same filth. A father can't be trusted with his daughter. This is the end of the world. This is the end of the world, right? And that's where we live today, and we've got to put that back together. And then your children, inshallah, they know that trusts are kept. We don't break these. And once you begin to break trust, will you believe in Allah? Because belief is trust, right? It is trust. If you can keep a trust and you won't break a trust, then you also believe in the trust. But when we see that everybody breaks their trusts, everybody, even the scholars, ooh, then you've got filth. And we are really in the cesspool. And a lot of Muslims live that way today. And you may agree and you may not agree. And you may know and you may not know. But we hear those stories all the time. And we ask Allah to protect us and to make us strong and to bring us back to where we ought to be. Allah knew where to put His message, right? He knew where to, and the Arabs of the Prophet's time were good people, honest people, trustworthy people. That's why the message was put there. They had pride, they were extremely tribalistic, and they were good fighters, but they didn't lie, and they didn't bear false witness, and they didn't break certain trusts. And that's the way it was for a time. And then these things usually begin to break down. But we ask Allah to enable us to put things back. Islam is coming to life. And these communities in the West, you know, which are a combination of people like yourselves, most of you, and the converts, this is the big secret in Islam. Because whenever you have that chemistry, then incredible things begin to happen. Then people begin to think this religion and to understand it in a way that they didn't before. The companions were all converts, okay? And a lot of the successors are converts. And some of the greatest things in Islam are from the chemistry of the convert coming together with the person who is born into Islam. The first book in Islam that was written as an original contribution is Kitab Sibawayh, the book of Sibawayh, which is one of the most beautiful statements of the Arabic language in its grammar and morphology that was ever written. And it's written by Amr ibn Qanbar, whom they called Sibawayh. Sibawayh. Or in Urdu you'd say Saib, right? You say Saib. Sibawayh. You know, it means little fragrance of apples. Saib is apple, right? Bu is fragrance. Sib, but in Persian, Sibawayh. Fragrance, little fragrance of apples. That's what his name was called. He dies before he's even 40 years old. Dies when he's about 32 or 33. He was very handsome, Persian, very intelligent. And his sheikh is Khalil ibn Ahmad al-Farahidi. And then he takes from Khalil all the secrets of the Arabic language, and then with his Persian mind, he puts down that there are 3 parts of speech, and that the name is a word that indicates a complete meaning in itself, but is not connected to time. Where are we going? And a verb, you mean a noun is not a person, place, or thing? Like, that's not a definition. That's an illustration. Like, you don't know what a noun is, do you? Well, it's a person, place, or thing. No, give me a definition. Don't give me examples. Say, no, a name or a nominal is a word that indicates a complete meaning in itself and is not tied to time or tense. And a verb is a word that indicates a complete meaning in itself and is tied to time or tense. And a particle is a word that indicates a meaning in other than itself. Wow. And then you've got sun letters and moon letters. Why do you have to make it so beautiful? Right? Why do you have to make it so tempting? Why do you have to make it so metaphysical? Why couldn't you say assimilated letters and non-assimilated letters? No, sun and moon. There's something happening here. This is a fatah. Okay, and this is the secret of the coming together of the new with the old on the periphery. The periphery is always in Islam where everything happens. And this is a periphery. And Spain and Portugal were always peripheries. Morocco is always a periphery. Turkey is always a periphery, by the way. Malaysia is always a periphery. Indonesia is always a periphery. This is where things happen. In the old Muslim world where we get everybody's a Muslim and so forth, alhamdulillah, that's great, that's wonderful, but then it gets stale and stagnant. That's why you need the water to move, and the water moves when you have conversion. And then you talk to Buddhists, you talk to Magians, you talk to Zoroastrians, you talk to atheists, you talk to materialists, and you bring Christians and Jews, and you bring them into the faith. اللهم وفقنا لما تحبه وترضى وجعلنا من عبيدك السعداء وأمتنا على كلمة الهدى علمنا ما ينفعنا ووفقنا للعمل بما علمتنا به واجعل ما نحن فيه خالصا مخلصا لوجهك الكريم يا رب العالمين اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما لا شقيا منا ولا محروما آمين 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 يا رب العالمين. It took a long time, right? So verse 5 is now declared finished, right? And tomorrow we look at verse 6, and we should be able to go quickly. Tomorrow we might do 4 or 5, inshallah, and more if we can, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum.